Streaming shows are killing movies, not because they're bad, per se, but because they're costing more and more every day and generally taking away from the magic of theatrically released films. We're going to break down this phenomenon and get to the bottom of why shows are pretty much murdering most of the movies coming out these days.
Why are you a child?
Because of when I was born.
Movies used to be events. Theaters used to be where you could experience something larger than life. Think Terminator, King Kang, or Avatar, The Last Air, the blue one, the blue people one. Trailers would build anticipation and the communal experience of watching a masterpiece in a theater full of strangers. That's what makes it special. Streaming, of course, is changing that. Not that it has to be a bad thing, it's just that watching at home is a different experience. You have more distractions, you have to pause every time you have to pee, every 30 minutes for me. Not to mention, TV used to be in a much smaller budget bracket, but not anymore. Platforms like Disney+, Apple+, Paramount+, pretty much anything with a plus in the name, are taking stories that should really be iconic theatrical releases and turning them into shows. Take Severance. That's a show I've really been getting into recently, and it's an Apple Plus show. Probably one of the best series to come out in a very long time. Severance follows Mark Scout, an employee at Lumen Industries who undergoes a procedure that splits his memories into two identities, one that only exists at work and another that only exists outside of it. As Mark and his coworkers begin to uncover the dark secrets behind the severance program, they're forced to question their reality, free will, and the true purpose of their work. It's a pretty genius concept because it's just a handful of characters running around a cubicle farm for the majority of the show. There's no way they spent a lot of money on this, right? Actually, it's one of Apple TV's most expensive shows, with a reported budget of $20 million per episode and $180 million for the first season. That's blockbuster movie money. Comparable to the biggest Marvel films, but without the direct profit that Marvel films usually see. If a season of this show costs $200 million, how are they making that back? At least with a real movie, there's a direct transaction and you can recoup that kind of cash. The show is brilliant, but probably would only improve if it was just a 2-hour theatrical experience. You'd have sharper pacing, more focused storytelling, and a more immediate emotional impact. The bigger trend at play here is that high concept ideas that would have made incredible movies are instead being made into shows. Streaming platforms are pouring movie-level budgets into TV, which is pulling resources, talent, and attention away from theatrically released films. The result is fewer movies that feel like true cultural events, and shows that feel like they're just there to be content. One of the biggest examples of this is the Disney Plus Star Wars shows. The Star Wars shows are really good examples of shows that make no sense as shows. Almost all of them would have been better if they just existed as a movie. The Mandalorian might be the one that stands out. It started a lot stronger, and it's smaller, more intimate stories from the Star Wars universe. But there's definitely a diminishing return with each season. And as Disney Plus churned out more shows like The Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ahsoka, all the cracks started to show. The problem with these shows is that they're not bad, but they're not great either. Most of them are just bloated, the pacing feels uneven, and they often feel like they're dragging out a story that should just be 2 hours. They just feel like they're not meant to be TV shows. They're movies that have been chopped up into tiny little bits and padded out to fit the streaming format. Can someone at Disney please explain to me why we got a solo prequel movie that was theatrically released, but an Obi-Wan show that can't make its money back directly? I mean, fans have waited decades for this story, but instead of a really tightly crafted, epic film that could make tons of money, we get a 6-episode series that feels like it's spinning its wheels half the time. From characters that were half-baked and no one cares about, to slowly chasing Princess Leia all over the gosh dang forest. The whole show is a real slog to get through just to see Hayden Christensen's crusty little face back in that helmet, which I did enjoy seeing, but that would have been a great climax for a movie, not a show. On top of this, the budgets are crazy. Disney Plus is spending $15 million or more per episode on these shows, with some seasons costing over $100 million. The Acolyte had a reported budget of $180 to $230 million for its 8 episodes, making it one of the most expensive shows ever produced, with an average cost of $22.5 to $28 million per episode. Despite its high production value, the show faced a lot of criticism for uneven storytelling and underwhelming characters. There is a danger of big studios just making content. When everything becomes content, nothing feels special anymore. There is no artistic value. Not every character needs a freaking show. Echo, I'm looking at you. And yes, I've heard that's a good show, but Star Wars was built on theatrical spectacle, movies that define generations.
It's working! It's working!
Now the magic of Star Wars is being diluted by a flood of streaming shows that feel way more like filler than the main event, and fans have really taken notice. This is how Disney has pretty much killed the Star Wars franchise in a little over a decade.
The power of one, the power of two, the power of many.
Not only did Disney do this with Star Wars, they did it with Marvel too. The bad shows brought down the value of the movies. Now, to go watch The Marvels, which is a really bad movie by the way, you have to watch not 1, not 2, but 3 really bad streaming shows for characters you don't even really care about. And at the end of the day, wouldn't it just be easier to put all that crap in a movie, especially if it costs just a couple million or something? So what does this mean for movies, especially from a streaming standpoint? Streaming is changing how the movie industry works overall. Studios are investing less in original theatrical films and more in streaming content. Directors and writers are being pressured to create series instead of standalone films. In fact, Quentin Tarantino recently made an appearance at Sundance and had this to say about streaming content. I've taken some of the flavor out of the language so I don't get demonetized and I don't get a lecture from my mom.
Making movies? Well, what the f*** is a movie now? Okay, what the f*** is a movie now? What, something that plays in theaters for a token release for 4 weeks, all right? And by the second week, you can watch it on television. I didn't get into all this for diminishing returns. I mean, it was bad enough in 2019, and that was the last year of movies. It's a show pony exercise now, the theatrical release. And then in 2 weeks, you can watch it on this one and that one.
Another thing with a lot of the streaming shows, like the Mighty Ducks streaming show, that could have just been a movie. Especially if you make them cheap enough, then you could get your money back and actually, do something cool there. Audiences are being trained to expect long, drawn-out content. Movies matter because they offer something artistically unique. On top of that, movies are long-form content that are meant to be an immersive experience that you take in all at once. Streaming just can't replicate that. If studios keep prioritizing streaming over cinema, we could lose the magic of the big screen and get a bunch of filler that we don't want anyway. Once that magic is gone, it ain't coming back. Some ideas are just better suited for the big screen or for a 2-hour format where they can be experienced as a complete, immersive story. Another good thing about movies is that in 2 hours you can determine if they're good or bad. You don't have to stick with the show for 2 seasons out of 10 to get a feel for the tone and where it's going. And I know all of this sounds like I don't like shows and I don't like streaming, but on the contrary, I really like streaming. I enjoy binge watching. I just find it to be an inferior experience when it comes to actual movies. And while I love that more movies are being made than ever, I do see that big budgets are losing more and more, and they're going to streaming where they can't even make their money. It just feels like we're headed in the wrong direction. And it's also, I think, bad if you're a filmmaker like me and you want to make a movie one day. What am I going to make? Something on Hulu? Something on Netflix? I don't know. At the end of the day, movies aren't just content, they're art. And they deserve to be treated that way. Just like all the good shows that are out there. Anyways, that's all I have to say about this. I'll see you in the next one.